week at the same time and place, unless otherwise noted, and try to bring in a pretty broad range of social entrepreneurs from different backgrounds. And we invite you to please join us afterwards, if you can, back at our offices at 118 South Main Street for a more informal discussion with our speaker today. A lot of exciting things coming up, especially this weekend. Tomorrow is the PCI Alumni Showcase, which is creating impact through design. And that's 10 to 12 tomorrow in the McCullough Social Space. We also have our first 118 South Main Street Skills Workshop with VSET's Andrew Signey, and that'll be this Wednesday at 7:30. That'll be in the newsletter coming out on Monday. And we're also now accepting applications for CSE Fellowship, which is open to all sophomores, sophomore Febs, and junior Febs. You can find that application on our website. So, but today we're very excited to have with us Pier LaFarge. Pier is class of 2010.5, and I actually first met Pier, I believe, on a hiking trip, but it turns out that he has a few other things going for him than being a nice guy and being good at building fires. So, Pier is the co-founder and CEO of Spark, which is a social venture focused on building a crowd investment platform that allows anyone to invest directly in the energy efficiency projects in our communities and small businesses. Spark enables small investors to put their money to work, making America's buildings smarter, healthier, and more productive while earning a solid return on investment. Pier also serves as an advisor to a number of startups and social ventures in the Middlebury community. And today, Pier is here to share with us his story and talk about the challenge of understanding profit as a powerful driving force behind impactful social enterprise. So please join me in welcoming Pier LaFarge.
Well, hi. I just wanted to start on a personal note and say that there is really, genuinely, just about nowhere I would rather be than right here. In a room filled with bright, engaged, passionate people. So many of you who I know and love and respect, and the rest of you, I bet, are pretty awesome. We have an incredible community, and to be able to talk about these issues and to get together and discuss these things in such a beautiful place, it's a real blessing. So I feel blessed, and thank you for having me here. The second thing I want to say, really, the classic thank you, but more than that, thank you to Liz and to John and Heather and Evan and Catherine, the rest of the team at the Center for Social Entrepreneurship. What these guys are giving you is a gift. What they're giving me, what they're giving our community as a whole, whether you're an alum, a student, a parent, a professor, an administrator. This is the beginning of something I think really special. Not really the beginning, but what they're building and what we're building together has a lot of meaning. And I think it'll change our community forever, for the better. That's a little bit about what I'm going to talk about today, but let's dive in. So the title of the talk, you've all read, Profit is Sustainability. I want to start out just by giving you a little bit of a roadmap about where we're going to end up, right? Where we're going to talk. So the next 30 minutes of your life, maybe even a little bit under, to make time for question and answers. We've got an hour. But I really want this to be conversational. First thing is how I got here, right? What I've done in the last couple of years. But more importantly, why I'm not really that different than you or anyone. I mean, as a student, I'm not that old. I'm just 2 years out of school, 3 years out of school. And I really want to draw a lot of parallels between the experiences you're having right now and the experiences that I'm having right now, right? And show how they're related. So how I got here, I want to talk kind of a little bit about the concepts. There's going to be kind of a body section of the talk, the role of social entrepreneurship on the landscape of change. I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means to me and what I think it means to our community. And then dive right into what does that mean for you, right? How can Middlebury and Middlebury students really sink their teeth into this stuff, leverage some of the resources like the center and our alums that are here, and really make this happen. So the first section, that's how I got here. It all started with that bicycle. It's the first thing I ever made in Illustrator, which is awesome. You don't use Illustrator. Race to Replace campaign. So something that I was lucky enough to get started with through SNG, co-founded with an awesome Middlebury alum named Ben Wessel. You know him. Some incredible folks, Olivia Noble, Sid Schultz, Maya Manwaki, Abigail Bora. we got together and thought about how we could create a campaign in Vermont that would remind young voters that there were real clean energy choices in elections, even in a state as liberal and progressive as Vermont, that you could get engaged with campaigns right here and make a real difference. So we sat down at SNG and then the first meeting and had 7 bright-eyed, bushy-tailed young freshman febs show up. And those 7 febs stayed with us for the next 9 months, all the way through a summer, when we got funding from Really Good Conservation voters to run that campaign as a fully staffed, fully integrated operation with the Shumlin campaign and a bunch of other gubernatorial campaigns. It ended up being part of an effort to reach out to 15,000 voters in Vermont. It was exciting, but I didn't realize at the time that that was really a type of entrepreneurship, right? And a lot of my talk today is going to be about a spectrum, from direct action and issue-specific campaigns all the way over to companies and kind of what's in the middle. But really, I didn't know that I was becoming a social entrepreneur. I didn't see the little details like building a team, building a pitch, building materials, telling a story to people, adding value to their lives, right? Solving a problem. I didn't see that as entrepreneurship because I didn't have the tools, the vocab, to think about it that way. I just thought I was an activist, a campaigner, and I was. But it's more than that. And that's what led me to the next stage in my life. As a result, as so many good things in my life have started as an email from John Isham saying, you should do this, maybe. Life changes. I was put in touch with an amazing Middlebury alum named Jessica Kyle at ICF, who brought me on board to this incredible company, this large corporate consultancy, 5,000 employees, $1 billion in revenue, sprawling operations all over the world, but at the core of it, this incredible passion for what they do, for what they can bring to the world and how they can use their expertise, their position, and their power to speak into processes like climate change, sustainability, health, education, transportation, in a really exciting way. As a brief plug, if any of you are out there thinking about how you can use your skills to make change, right, and maybe entrepreneurship or starting your own thing doesn't seem like the right move right off the bat, companies like ICF are out there and they're doing really good work. So when I got to ICF, I felt like the luckiest person in the world. Here I was, somebody who had come out of school being excited to work in climate change, excited to speak into this process, but not really knowing how, if not for nonprofits, campaigns. I wanted something more, and ICF gave me this incredible vehicle, this platform, to hone some of the quantitative skills, analytical skills that I had started to learn here, and really expand and really formalize them. What we did there, in the entrepreneurship sense, you guys familiar with the term entrepreneurship? So entrepreneurship, starting your own thing, solving a problem. Entrepreneurship is establishing a new business or product within the context of an existing business. And that's a little different, it's a little bit less glamorous, a little bit less sleeping in your car, but it is more sustainable in that you have these incredible resources, these incredible supports behind you to do some really exciting things. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about ICF in a second, but entrepreneurship was what characterized my experience there. And then the last step in my journey is what I'm doing now, what really I've just embarked full-time on, which is Spark. We'll get into that as well. So at ICF, I showed up as a first-year employee, and about 4 months in, met 2 incredible guys who I really clicked with, really felt like we had something in common and that we liked talking about ideas. So we sat down over beers, where all good things start, or whiskey. And we wrote a white paper. We said, look, what could ICF be doing that it's not doing already, right? What services, what skills does ICF have that aren't talking to each other in the right way? And how could we plug that into a new market? We were passionate about energy efficiency. We were passionate about finance. So we said, well, no one is out there at an enterprise level telling companies how to structure energy efficiency finance. What are the options? It's a complex and ever-shifting landscape. How can you put your capital into this stuff in a way that's exciting? So we wrote a white paper. We marched into our vice president's office and kind of said, we have an idea. She was like, okay, that's great. We wrote a paper about it. She was like, even weirder. And so we dropped it on her desk and started a 2 or 3 month process of essentially what amounted to running it up the flagpole. Starting with our direct manager and one of the greatest people I've ever met, Marion Van Pelt. We basically kept pitching it, and they kept saying, okay, we see it, but it's probably not going to happen. Establishing a whole new service offering, we're a big company, we don't really do that, I don't know what this is. Kept pitching it, all the way up to our division leader, and actually got a energy efficiency finance service offering established at ICF in the ground. And at the end of that process, there was this incredible moment where as a young person, you're looking up at these people you respect and admire, and they've done these incredible things and have these big titles and gray hair, which is also one of the greatest resources in the world, gray hair. You have this moment where you're like, okay, you'll run it. We'd written all of our materials with their names on the front. And they go, got the wrong names in the front. You guys clearly know how to talk about this stuff. Go do it. Go make it happen, or don't. Here's your rope. Try not to hang yourself with it. So we essentially ran the service offering for the next year and a half, 2 years, on a basic kind of consulting pathway, assessment, design, all this stuff into strategic planning. We kind of offered these services onto the market and tried to see who would end up, wanting them. We brought in a whole bunch of contracts, about 14 in all, including with some really exciting clients. We landed a big contract with eBay to design one of the first large-scale corporate energy efficiency investment funds, an established pool of money that can invest in eBay's operations and in the community. That's actually still an ongoing thing. Andy's Homegrown, we wrote a really cool white paper about what people in the corporate space were doing. We worked with Whitehorse Canada, Fujifilm, Dartmouth, and actually a couple more, LA County, Santa Barbara, really thinking through what their options were for investing in efficiency. And where that led us was, one, to a really interesting realization that we loved thinking about really nerdy things, which of course we already knew, but energy efficiency finance had this kind of amazing split structure where there was a large part of the market, big projects, $600,000, $1 million and above, that were being really well served by the options that were out there. ESCOs, vendor financiers, ESCOs are energy service companies, vendor financiers and banks. If you had a big project with great returns, they'd be like, yeah, we'll give you $1 million. But if you had a small project with the same high returns and even the same risk structure, no one would give you money. And we couldn't figure out why that was. There are a lot of reasons, but at the end of the day, we realized the biggest reason wasn't a lack of awareness. It wasn't a lack of demand on the part of people with those small projects. It was just a structural misfit. These banks, these ESCOs, they were big. Banks have gotten big. ESCOs have gotten big. Companies need scale to act in the way that they want to on the global economy. It's a big economy. So if you get big, you have a lot of capital you need to place. If you get big, you have a lot of overhead costs to support that bigness. So when you bring them a deal that's below a certain size, they don't have time to think about it. It's not worth their time to think about a deal below a certain size because it's out of scale. But there was a problem. 47% of energy use in the United States is in buildings less than 50,000 square feet. 50,000 square feet is like a small supermarket, not even a big one. That means that there's this huge amount of energy efficiency that could be done, but only in small projects, and no financing to meet it. And obviously, a lot of those small organizations are exactly the ones that don't have a check to write $100,000, $200,000 for new LEDs, new boilers, new HVAC, right? So there's this kind of triple structural misfit. And again, one of the things that I hope if you take anything from this talk is that social entrepreneurship is about finding these interesting problems. And we were talking about, Andy was talking about this a little bit at lunch earlier, finding these interesting problems and thinking, well, what if we built something to fix it? Right? And you start thinking about that. So that problem is what led us to Spark. We realized there was a whole landscape of small buildings out there that were inefficient, right? Not doing what they should be doing, not as healthy, not as productive. There was money being wasted by exactly the people who could afford it least, these small businesses, charter schools, churches, community organizations, nonprofits. And so what we did was design Spark, a company that could be built from the ground up to solve that structural problem and to provide targeted financing to small and medium scale efficiency projects. And how do we do that? Right? In the same way that banks and ESCOs are large and have high opportunity cost, high overhead, we wanted to get financing from a source that didn't have great opportunity, right? That had low opportunity cost, that wanted to invest in something direct and real. And that source of capital is us, is the crowd. If you've got $100, $500, $1,000 in a checking account that's earning 0.001% or a savings account, or maybe you're scared to put part of your 401k or your savings into the stock market because you don't want to expose it to macro risk or whatever, you're looking for ways to invest that money. And there aren't that many good options. So we realized there was this whole pool of capital out there, right, in the crowd that was looking for ways to invest, looking for new places to put their money, and not just as a donation, not just as a feel-good or you get a t-shirt, but as a real hard-nosed investment that would give them a good return. So we wanted to connect the capital from the crowd through a platform into that opportunity in small and medium scale efficiency, right? Connect those two dots. It's like a negative and a positive pole. And we wanted to be the wire that let the spark jump. We made cool infographics like maps. I don't even know what this really means other than that business can spread and things can happen when you build them. I was looking at this earlier and I was like, I just love maps. So before I move on to the next part, what I want to conclude with is that my journey has been one from kind of an early unawareness of what I was doing with social entrepreneurship, with campaigns, into this kind of larger corporate context that I felt passionate about and felt like I could build something and was given an amazing opportunity to build something, to the awareness and the understanding that that opportunity and that experience gave me by working for people who were older and smarter and really understood the industry. And then to this kind of daring moment where you start down the path of thinking about what you could build to solve a problem you see. So the role of social entrepreneurship on the landscape of change. That's a grandiose title. I think all talk should have grandiose titles, because why miss an opportunity? I want to define some terms real quick. The landscape of change, as I see it, and I'm going to read this, the array of tools, both organizational and practical, that are available to those seeking to effect a desired change. We have options. We all want change. And I think, by the way, that's one of the greatest strengths of this community is that we want change. Right? We want to have an impact. We want our work and our minds and our time to mean something, to change something. And we have tools. It's like a toolbox or a quiver, pick your metaphor. But what's strange is that for a long time, we haven't included companies and private sector entities, for-profits, in part of that toolbox. We've looked a lot at campaigns, we've looked a lot at other organizations, but we haven't looked at social entrepreneurship. So that's what I want to think, what you want to be thinking about when I talk about the landscape of change. So what is social entrepreneurship? Social entrepreneurship is focused on this word. How many of you guys have heard this word before? That's Middlebury. It's got to be like everyone, right? It's got to be carved into the stone somewhere. Externality, right? This is what happens when markets don't work, right? When markets fail or stumble, they cause problems. Social externalities and social entrepreneurship, as I see it, is the practice of identifying and building structures to address these externalities, to fix them, to make them better, right? To make people's lives better. So social entrepreneurship, as a tool in this toolbox, really is best suited to address these things. Market failures, inefficiencies, in the kind of most economic sense, right? Underserved communities, maybe a rural community or an underprivileged urban community isn't getting services that they would gladly pay for and desperately need, but simply the company hasn't provided it yet, so you can build something to do that for them, right? And even some of the more traditional movement building and change-oriented topics like injustice, gender, racial, social inequalities, right? Social entrepreneurship can identify a problem and it can build a solution, a tool to fix it. But what's different about social entrepreneurship is that when it does that, it builds a solution that it gets paid to implement. It gets revenue, money, for making people's lives better. Which is why I think that this is really one of the core ideas in social entrepreneurship, is to find things people hate. Find things people hate about their lives, about their days, about their work, problems that they just really wish would go away. And build things to solve them. That sounds simple, but it's actually really different than what a lot of companies do. Right? Look at this laptop. It's a nice laptop. It was incrementally better than the one that came before it. Look at your phones, look at your tablets, and Apple's really the only thing I can think of here. But much of the old economy was focused on moving society forward through incremental improvements in products, for selling us things that were better and are better. They do enrich our lives, but you're ultimately marketing something as better than what you just had. What you had before worked, but the next thing will be better. right? That's traditional business, traditional entrepreneurship. Social entrepreneurship says, I'm not just going to market something that's a little bit better. I'm going to solve a problem that no one else has tried to solve before. I'm going to create a solution or a product or a service that unlocks an opportunity that the market has overlooked or failed to solve. Just like with Spark, that structural problem that was preventing all of these good projects from getting financing, right? We think that we have an idea, an ability to solve that problem in a way that other people haven't, right? It's removing barriers that people hate. For us, that moment was when we were thinking about contractors and developers and efficiency. These are folks going out there and selling efficiency projects to small businesses. They go out and they do an audit and they say, hey, you're a small business, you've got a $100,000 LED upgrade, and guess what? It's going to save you $40,000 a year. Small business goes, wow, great. That's fantastic, $40,000 a year less in utility bills, that's great. Can you find me a loan? And the contractor, obviously, if they can't find them a loan, loses the sale, not because their customer didn't want their service, but because they couldn't write a check to buy it. They were selling something to someone that couldn't buy their service. They hate that. So that's why Spark uses those people to bring us projects. We market our financing to solve that problem for them, right? We're fixing something that they don't like. With investors, we're fixing something that they don't like, and that they don't have something to invest in that's tangible and real and simple, right? And there are a dozen examples like this in the landscape of social entrepreneurship. So when you fix something that people hate, and you solve the problems that I outlined there, right? When you have a solution to one of those problems that works, that's scalable, right? And it's not easy, but it happens. You get this incredible cycle, right, of revenue, what people give you to solve that problem, and the change that that problem being solved creates. And that change being solved increases visibility of your business and leads to increased demand for your solution, which in turn causes people to pay you again for what you just did. Now, if you think about it, that cycle of profit reinforcing change and change reinforcing revenue and profit really has implications about the spectrum of the landscape of change, right? How different organizations, how different tools in this toolbox fit into that particular model. So what do I mean by that? Issue-based campaigns and direct action do things really well. They're important. They are society's immune system, the response to pressing issues and pressing problems, where we say, no, that's not okay. We have to push back on that. We have to push back on this, right? We build these campaigns to give ourselves voice, and that's huge. But they're usually kind of flash in the pan, right? They're supported by a wealthy donor or grants or foundations. And they can't necessarily sustain themselves just by solving the solution they set out to solve, even if they're successful. Grant-funded nonprofits are a little bit more scalable in that they have institutional structure and depth. They have the ability to create a brand, to create a message, a visible institution, a vehicle for change, right? Think of 350. People see it not as a single campaign, but as a vehicle for many campaigns, a vehicle for many voices to solve these problems. So it's a little bit more scalable, but they're still dependent on people giving them money, right? The economy has to be good. The donors have to be happy with what they're doing to give them money again the next year to keep having that change. It's hugely important, and there are problems, to be clear, that you can't solve without this, right? So I'm not saying that these need to go away, but that they're useful tools in a toolbox that should be seen as a continuous spectrum between these guys and what's coming next. So revenue-supported nonprofits are a little bit in the middle. You guys heard of Hot Bread Kitchen in Manhattan? Any of you guys? They work with immigrant women in a bakery. They take their recipes from their home country, and they sell the bread at markets. Retail, wholesale, they're in restaurants all over New York City, and they're about 75 or 80% supported by their own revenue. So that means the change they're having in the lives of these immigrant women is supported by the very bread and the recipes that they bake. They're like a company, but they don't take profit, but they make revenue. The problem with a revenue-supported nonprofit is that if you're a nonprofit, there's this incredible incentive to take free money, because free money is great. And grants are, in some ways, free money, some strings attached. But a lot of revenue-supported nonprofits find themselves scaling not just day by day through their revenue like a company would, but by racing ahead and creating grants, which then in turn creates a portional dependency. They may not be 100% dependent, but if they have a staff of 10, maybe 3 of those people are dependent on grants. And that is still dependency. They're still limited in some ways by that. Impact-focused social ventures, and I wanted to split social ventures into two particular contexts, impact-focused and financial first. Impact-focused are social ventures that make money, make a profit, right? They're viable businesses, they can support themselves, but they don't offer quite the returns or quite the kind of hard-nosed financial expectations that a lot of traditional investors would have. You need impact investors or people who really care about what you're doing. They'll say, yeah, we're going to get a 7% return. Normally we would have wanted 10, right, of a hurdle rate. We wanted 10, but we'll kind of give you the 3 because you're doing something I care about. You're working in energy efficiency or clean energy or human rights, right? Returns adjusted. Financial first social ventures, in my opinion, are really all the way over on that spectrum because they have impact, they have change associated with what they do. Social externality, positive externality is part and parcel of their business model. But they're companies. They have a balance sheet that looks good to any investor. They've got a growth scenario that's attractive to their founders, to their investors. They're going to make good money. It doesn't stop them from changing the world. It enables them from to change the world. And when an investor looks at them, they say, yeah, great. I'm going to get my 10% return, or 10x return, or 20x return, as it might be. I'm going to give you money to do this, both because I want you to change the world, and because I want you to make me a couple $1 million. And that sometimes rings with a little bit of uncomfort, I think, in our community, right? Middlebury isn't super comfortable sometimes, nor are any community always totally comfortable with this idea of marrying profit and change. It's a little bit awkward. But again, if you take something away from this talk, as young Middlebury students, as people who are thinking about how they can make change, for me, it would be that it's not a dirty word. So this is a brief list of not dirty words, kind of in the spirit of my mind. Profit and private sector. These aren't the other. These aren't other things that other people do, or the people in the financial club, or those guys who have the interviews in the library with the suits we see sometimes and don't really understand why they're talking like that. It's not other people. This is us. We're change makers. We want to make change, and these are some of our most powerful tools to do it. So, what does that mean? If you're a Middlebury student, right, you're probably seeing where I'm going here. If you're a Middlebury student and you're looking to use one of these tools, I think that Middlebury students are purpose-built for social entrepreneurship. One of the things that I've heard most over the last couple of years from Middlebury students applying to jobs at ICF or looking for different things in the job market, right, is, I don't know if I really know how to do that. I don't know if I'm like quantitative enough, or Excel, opened it. I'm aware of it. It's on my computer. That's okay. You can be taught these things. You can learn these things. You can grasp that part of it. Never underestimate the power of an education that thinks about systems, that thinks about how forces act in those systems, and brings together these disciplines, because social entrepreneurship is nothing. In fact, business is nothing if it isn't about communication, about storytelling, about design. There's a whole panel on that later. It's every discipline all at once. If you're an English major, companies will hire you to tell their story, to make people excited to be part of your brand, to be part of your mission, right? If you are an architect or an artist, people will hire you to design things that people want to be a part of, or they want to buy or purchase or use. If you are an economist, then obviously, but if you're a political scientist, there's a place for you too, right? This is about liberal arts. Business, there's nothing in some ways more liberal artsy than social entrepreneurship. So infrastructure is everything. It's great that we're purpose-built for it. It's great that liberal arts gives us this ability, but you need help. You need infrastructure. And that is why I started my talk the way I did, saying that I think that what John and Liz and Heather and Evan and Catherine are doing is one of the greatest gifts that anyone can give this community, because it's infrastructure. It gives you the vocabulary. It gives you the awareness that these are tools that we can use. It gives you that courage to jump into this world and to reach out and for somebody to grasp you by the hand, right, for lack of a less corny metaphor. The infrastructure that is around you, whether it's alums, right, like me, or like Andy, like Alex, or all other people who are out there doing this in the world, right, you can reach out to them as alums through Middlebury. You can reach out to your professors. You can reach out to the center and get help, get the infrastructure that allows you to start down this path. And that is important. It doesn't work without that infrastructure. And you're not alone. Starting a business at first seems like it's a lot about the idea. It's a lot about energy efficiency and solving a structural problem. That's like the first 20 minutes of being, what it seems like being an entrepreneur. And it carries through. It's not like you lose that passion, but you have to go through the business of being a startup, the business of being a business. And it's way more time consuming and way more complex than you ever see coming. So who here would identify themselves as a business nerd? That's way in. All right, that's one. Being a business nerd is great. I'm a business nerd. I love that nitty-gritty. But not everyone does. And not everyone who becomes a social entrepreneur is going to want to have tracking spreadsheets and tracking spreadsheets of your tracking spreadsheets when you get too many tracking spreadsheets. Not everyone's going to want to think about 1099 forms, W-2s, HR, payroll, 401ks, that boring stuff that gets in the way of the vision. But what I would like to tell you is that it has never been easier, ever, than it is today to start a company with help, to start a company with the support of organizations that are themselves businesses dedicated to taking those hurdles away and letting you focus on your core business. These are some of the companies that are helping Spark. These are law firms like Wilson Sonsini, Baker Hostetler. These are professional employee organizations, know them and love them, like Ambrose or PEO Spectrum, that take care of everything. $166 a month per employee gets you HR, payroll, 1099s, W-2s, compliance stuff, 401ks, healthcare enrollment, all this good stuff, right? It's just done for you, and it's done right. So you can focus on your business, and you can minimize the risks that are associated with doing it wrong. One of the reasons a lot of small businesses fail is because they focus on their mission and not on the detailed back of the house stuff, and it trips them up. It's execution risk, implementation risk. It's why people don't like investing in young teams, because they don't think about this stuff, because it's boring and stupid. But it's also the way the world works. So it's got to get done, and you're not alone doing it. These types of companies are your friends, and for a fee, but a reasonable one, can make this easier. You can focus on the idea. The second thing is related. Fall in love with the practical. Right? Everything I just said is very practical in its details. But I urge you to more than just think that you're not alone and think that you'll be okay, that somebody else will do it. Fall in love with the practical. Fall in love with the little things about business, the little flourishes, the little ways to present an idea to get someone excited, to see that gleam in their eye when you know that they understand what you've got can make their lives better. And by falling in love with the practical, you have an opportunity then to achieve your ideals, right? The practical isn't just the details, it's what enables the rest. If you want to build a beautiful house, learn how to build a foundation and then build the house. Trying to build a company without falling in love with the practical is like building a house and putting a big pile of sand down and being like, I'm going to start. Right? It's not going to work for some structural reasons. So, last piece of clothing advice, a couple last. Surround yourself with people who are smarter than you. I'm pretty smart. I'm good at talking. The only reason that I think that I have a shot at being an entrepreneur is because the people I work with are twice as smart as I am. I learn things from them every day. They constantly surprise me in a way that I think I've got a great answer on a conference call, or I've got a great answer in a pitch. They come in with something twice as good. If you're the smartest person in a room, two things. If you actually are, leave. And two, you're probably not. You're probably just missing the value that are in the people around you. You're failing to extract that value. Especially if people are quiet, right? There's a TED Talk called The Wisdom of Introverts that blew me away. Because for those of you who know me, I'm not the most introverted person. But I really feel like for the first part of my career and first part of my time at Middlebury, I was missing the value of people who were quiet, people who were sitting in the back of the room and listening. Right? those people are thinking deep thoughts, and you miss their contributions at your peril. You are the one that can talk, that can present, that can pitch, and yeah, you've always got a ready answer because that's your skill, and that's great. But a lot of people around you are smarter than you, whether you realize it or not. And the last thing, we also talked about this at lunch, is put your idea through the ringer. Kick it to pieces internally with your own team, people who are smarter than you, and then expose it brutally, really expose it to people who have years of experience in this field, who have pattern knowledge. There's no more important substance in the world than pattern knowledge. They've been working in something for 10 years. They will see things that you will not see. No matter how smart, no matter how bright, no matter how much homework you've done, people who have been there day in and day out for 20 years will see it, and they'll tell you what it is. They'll tell you why your idea might not work or what you've missed, and they will make your business stronger. They'll make your campaign stronger. They'll make your paper stronger, by the way, whatever it is. Sorry, I was having flashbacks again to John's office. Spreadsheet. If you put your idea through the ringer, it's going to be stronger, right? And it's only when you really expose yourself, not just once a quarter, not once a year, not one conversation that was kind of tough, but you kind of pitched around it, you're like, oh no, my idea's fine, we're okay, right? Listen, and ask yourself the hard questions about why your idea might not be fine and how it can get better. I'm almost out of time. Obviously, never stop connecting. Send emails, lots of them, to everyone. Never underestimate the power of being young. A .edu email address can get you an informational interview with anyone, right? You think that, oh, they're so powerful, they're so big and important, I'm so young, what are they going to talk to me for? You will be blown away. I have been blown away by the generosity of spirit and the kindness and generosity of time that people will give to you at all levels of power, right? All levels of experience. And it's psychology. From our end, we see them as these unreachable others that couldn't possibly want or care to talk to us. From their end, they see a bright, cool young person, right? Maybe you're wearing a cool flannel, whatever, I don't know. They see bright people reaching out to them and saying, I want your advice. I think you're smart. I think you're cool. I think you're powerful. That feels good. If you reach out in that honest spirit, people will reach back. Not every time, right? And sometimes you have to be persistent, and persistence is annoying, in case you were wondering, right? Sending lots of emails, it is actually annoying, but it's also effective. And there's this kind of frustrating duality where persistence and annoyance are not mutually exclusive. You can succeed while being annoying. I have a brief rule of thumb for those of you who are planning to embark on these email campaigns, jihads, if you will. Send no more than 5 if you get no response, and no more than 10 if you get intermittent responses. Make of it what you will. The last thing I'd like to say before the end is give back, and give back early. I mean that both, in terms of your time and passion and money, if you've got it, to Middlebury, to the people who helped you learn the things you know, and the people who are giving you gifts every day. But give back to each other. When you get a job, start taking informational interviews and start helping people through that process immediately. You're not too young. You're not too inexperienced. That closeness to that process is hugely valuable, and people love hopping on a call with young entrepreneurs, young alums, wherever they are. And if those people give back, our whole community gets richer. We all want it for ourselves. We all want advice. So when you're in that position, do it, and do it soon. Don't wait till you're old and powerful and have gray hair. Do it from the first day on your job. So that's it. Give me a call. Shoot me an email. I like talking to people. Yeah, thank you again very much. Appreciate it. I think, right up 40 minutes.
Yeah.
So I think we've got about 20 minutes left. That was a little bit of a kind of talk, projection. I really want to hear from you guys. I want you to talk to each other and to me, so let's just have a conversation for 20 minutes. I'm going to grab a chair and sit. You can't have conversations when you're standing. It doesn't make any sense.
I asked you about this at lunch, but can you just talk a little bit about the scale of investment, the minimum scale of investment? for your investors in this? It's
Inspire.
something that, like, as a young poor person, or a person, like you're interested in investing, but you don't have, you know, the financial means to make large investments. That's
Yeah.
something that's special about this.
Yep. So if you guys are familiar with a company called Mosaic, which has really trailblazed this space in solar investment, right? We were inspired by them and copied a lot of them, right, in efficiency, but that's how markets work. You can invest at $25 in solar panels, and I encourage you to do that. They're up and running now. When Spark becomes operational, when we launch our platform, it'll be the same thing. $25 minimum investment. If you see a small business or a church or a charter school in your community that you want to invest directly in and have that impact in, you can invest for 25 bucks. Obviously, you're not going to earn a lot of actual dollars with $25, but that's the minimum level at which you can support it.
Can you talk a little bit about sort of the trade-offs? So you're talking about these tools. So one's the nonprofit tool, one's the for-profit tool. What do you see as sort of the trade-offs between those two things? And even more within the profit sphere, what do you see as the trade-offs between serving consumers and businesses, and how do those constrain you?
That's a great question. Those are two really important questions. The first one, the trade-off is, I think, about scale and replicability. You know, there are a lot of other trade-offs, and I think, honestly, a lot of the people in this room are probably better equipped than I am to talk about some of the nuanced ways that campaigns and nonprofits can really solve problems that other people can't. And I think that's the biggest trade-off when you go for profit. There are going to be problems that you might want to solve that you can't because you can't find revenue in it. Right? I make it look like a spectrum that's easy, but there's a really high wall somewhere on that spectrum that says at some point the solution you're providing, the positive externality you're generating, is not going to give you money back, or not at the rate you need it to. That might be because the population you're serving is too underprivileged, right? Too disconnected from regular financial systems. You know, there are all sorts of reasons, but there is a trade-off where there are some problems that simply can't be solved without nonprofits, without campaigns, which is why, you know, I think that there's a slight antagonism in some ways within the community of change and change makers between the two. And I think it's easy for one side to say, oh, well, nonprofits are just dependent on foundations. Oh, well, businesses are they're not going to solve the hardest problems, but they have to make money. You know, I think it is really a fluid spectrum, but there are real trade-offs between the two. Businesses and consumers, so are you guys familiar with wonderful acronyms, B2B and B2C, right? Business to business and business to consumer. They're two major sectors, but they're two totally different models. When you're marketing to companies, you're marketing to people who really pay attention, hopefully, to their business models. They know what they need. They sit there thinking every day about how they can make their business more efficient, more scalable. So if you have a service that can make a business's life easier, right? That can make a business's life less frustrating, you know, that find things people hate. If you find something that a business hates, likely when you present it to them, they're going to know it, and they're going to be excited about solving it, and they're also going to know exactly how much they can pay you to solve it within their business model. Businesses just know a lot more about their finances. If you solve a problem for a consumer, they may not be aware it's a problem. They may be aware it's a problem and not care, right? A lot of businesses fail because they solve a problem, they knock it out of the park. But the reality is that consumers are focused on other things. Maybe that problem that you're solving with a 200% return is actually 1% of their income, or 0.1% of their income. And actually, they just care about their car payment and their rent, and they just really don't care that you're solving this problem for them, even though it looks great on paper. I've seen a lot of those pitches. I've seen a lot of those companies that are doing great work, but people aren't going to care. So I think B2B is actually great. You can solve a problem for a business, go out and do it, right? That's largely what Faraday's doing. It's a great market to be in. It's a great market to work for, to understand how businesses work and what they hate, what their problems are. It's also a great thing to invest in because, again, their consumers are going to be a little bit more savvy of the boundaries.
Thanks.
Of course, good question. Jack?
So we're kind of thinking about your intro versus entrepreneurship, and for some reason the government shut down the bottom a little while ago. I'm wondering if there is either potential or existing examples of this kind of social entrepreneurship going on within government that you're familiar with, or opportunities that maybe you've already identified.
Yeah, there is. Government you know, having worked as a part federal and part corporate consultant for the last couple of years, you know, there are a lot of really crazy things about government, but there are also a lot of really inspiring ones. There are programs, especially within the Department of Energy in our world. Again, I'm not going to have visibility on all topics of this, but in my world, the DOE runs programs like the Sunshot Incubator and Competition, right? These are programs focused on providing money to solar companies that are doing innovative things, right? Mosaic got a $2 million grant to support their platform build out through this, which is awesome, and we're jealous of. But at the same time, you know, these are investments by the government in what I think government should most invest in, which is companies that are trying to solve these big problems and make money doing it and therefore scale, take it out of the hands of government, right? So there are. Sunshot, their DOE is going to be, you know, rolling out some new programs in the next year, looking at other industries in clean tech and energy, which is really exciting for us and for everyone. You know, within healthcare, there are a lot of exciting kind of incubator and sustainability challenge programs. The Veterans Affairs Administration, the VA, runs some interesting programs. The HHS runs things like Partner Green Health and some big stuff. You know, the Better Buildings Alliance, you know, challenges that spur private sector actors to get involved with government support and resources. So they're there. OMB does some interesting stuff around social impact bonds. I have a couple friends in DC work in that, if anyone's interested in social impact bonds and how they can be used to minimize recidivism and be applied to all sorts of other interesting social, kind of capturing the value of social externality. So they do it. You know, I wish they did more of it. I wish they did it with a little bit less self-conscious frustration about supporting private sector. The government has some of the same problems that I think sometimes the community of change has in being okay putting public dollars or foundation dollars or whatever into companies, into promoting companies. There are great solutions out there to these problems, and if a foundation or a campaign could lift them up through their list or share their visibility, more people who care about this stuff would have a tool to solve it, right? Thereby solving one of the biggest problems in some ways in government or in nonprofits, which is what next? You may be aware of a problem, right? I know climate change is a thing. I know that energy efficiency needs to be solved, but what do I freaking do about it? Stop sending me emails about the problem. You know, if we could overcome that, I think it would be great, but obviously it's a lot more complicated than just saying it. You know, there are real reasons why governments and nonprofits don't support businesses in that way always, but yeah.
Thanks, this is really great. I'm curious, as one of many seniors in this room, I hate to bring up the job conversation, and I don't want to bring it up directly in terms of what would you suggest. But I'm just thinking in terms of the process and the conversations that we've had with career advisors and other people that visited campus and that sort of thing. In order to get involved in this, people say, oh, you need to start small. Find something like Venture for America and get your hands in at the startup level and work with that. And other people say, oh, you need to get at the grand scale. Find a massive company you can work in and get that big picture, and then you know how to actually start small. What's your perspective on that in terms of understanding how this all works? What should we be looking at in terms of Middlebury students that have these skills or want to develop these experiences? What do you suggest?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I've thought, again, I'm really young too, so I'm still thinking about that stuff.
Yeah.
I think about that all the time. I'm just sitting in the chair in front of people instead of sitting in the chair, but you know, it's really, we all deal with this stuff, and I don't think you ever stop, really. I think that a lot of people they waste a lot of time on that question looking outwards, looking at what other people have done, looking at mentors and successful alums. I think they should spend more time looking inward, thinking about what they want, what works for them, and not just thinking about it in this kind of trajectory way, like what will I tell my parents, what will I tell my friends before graduation, how will this look on paper. I think that you should spend a lot of time thinking about the day-to-day of your life and how you want it to look. If you don't want to deal with corporate bureaucracy and cubicles and staff meetings, progress reports, and time tracking sheets, if that really bothers you, right, then maybe starting your own thing or getting involved with something like Venture for America or going for work for a startup or interning for a startup might be your path, right? If you think that you can get over those corporate kind of rigmarole problems, you know, those day-to-day frustrations, and suck the marrow out of the institutional knowledge of a successful business, if you can expose yourself to the wisdom and the expertise of people who are older than you, better than you, if you think that learning day by day how a business actually runs and operates, kind of writing it all down in your head for later use, if you think that that, is a big enough payoff for the problems you overcome in a corporation, then maybe you think about that. I mean, for me, I love starting things, but I really felt like I needed to do the day-to-day grind, right? That as a big ideas person and as kind of a very kind of easy talker, stuff like that I really needed to buckle down and get some of that experience and do it the hard way. Not that I didn't love my job at ICF, but really expose myself to the idea that someone might actually know a lot more than me about something, right? And that really worked. That was hugely humbling for me, to wake up every day and go into a job where I wasn't the most experienced or smartest or best talker. It's easy here in class, right, to be like, yeah, awesome. Because we are awesome. The other thing that blows my mind, just as a tangent, is just how freaking awesome Middlebury students are. You meet these people in other cities, you have other friends, you meet somebody at a potluck, and you're just like, how are you so awesome? How are we all so, it's like this huge love fest, right? But it's true, it's like quantitatively true, we're great. But despite that, you've got to, some people have to learn where they're not great, where their strengths are and where they're not. And for me, that was learning that my strength is in ideas and in pitching and in talking and in explaining, telling stories, and some of the operations, some of the quantitative stuff, but that what I really needed was to partner with people who could overlap with my skills. They could pitch and talk too, but really signed every email, dotted every I, every T, really had this, like my business partner, Joe, my work husband, one of them. It's like a marriage when you go into these people. He's the one with tracking spreadsheets of his tracking spreadsheets, right? Because he's a genius. And he's a genius in a way that I'm not. And that support, right, that not literal marriage, but that support between two people and between a team is what makes startups live and die. And that expands out into the rest of the team, right? What skills do they have that you don't? And sometimes I think the hardest thing about being an entrepreneur is identifying the skills you don't have. In this kind of cult of entrepreneurship, and in some ways the cult of Middlebury, in some ways as a student, we're taught to identify the skills we have, right? You're always told, what are your skills? And that's great. But in a lot of ways, the skills you don't have affect your decision making a lot more directly than the skills you do have. Because the skills you do have are visible, and the skills you don't are what make you fail.
So this has been fantastic. Just a couple of thoughts. One is that I really see loud and clear your experience at ES 401, which if you don't know afterwards, you can hear about the experience that Pier and his class had, which is a great example. And just that sort of combination of hands-on learning and analytics, you can see loud and clear how that plays a role. I also want to say how magnificent I think that last answer was as it relates to something you said earlier, pattern knowledge.
Yeah.
That's a great phrase.
I'm obsessed with that term, by the way. If
Great
anyone wants to
phrase.
talk for like 2 hours about that, I will get beers with you and just talk about that.
And having Steve and Jack and Ann here, we ask students to learn about and think about ecosystems broadly defined, which is a sort of form of just pattern knowledge.
Yeah.
And I think what you just did with Jake's answer is to say each of us puts ourselves within patterns. Right. And I'll just finish with this. I think the one choice we made at the center, which I'm increasingly happy with, and you really, with your response to Jake, captured why it's important, is for students to, in the oldest of phrases, know thyself.
Yeah.
That's what we try to do. And then the rest of it will come with all the trial and error and heartache. But take that time to know thyself. And the beautiful part is that's what Murray Drive's trying to do.
Yeah.
That's what the most traditional liberal arts aficionados.
Classical.
Yeah, right. So so I just want to thank you because I thought that was a great answer, and it fits not only with your personal experience, as so many of us have seen, but certainly with what we're hoping to do broadly on this campus.
Yeah. And I think that that's one of the most important things that a liberal arts campus can do, is to, yeah, know thyself, but not just what you're good at.
Right.
Because you'll figure out what you're not eventually.
Can I riff on that just a little bit? Looking back on your time at Middlebury, what do you see now that you wish you had done or had the opportunity to do that would have bettered you
Yeah.
in what you're trying to do?
To be totally honest, everything that the Center for Social Entrepreneurship does. I've talked to so many alums, some of which are coming back for the panel tomorrow, 10 a.m., design and startups. It's going to be awesome. Some freaking rock stars are on that panel. I've talked to so many alums who, when I tell about the center, either for the first time or who just have heard about it, just go, what? So yeah, I mean, I could say a lot of different things, but that's the biggest one. I loved and love this place fiercely. It changed my life. I think my life was pretty good already, but it made it 1,000 times better. And having a community of people and professors and staff that I have developed, what I think are lifelong relationships with, and to have learned from them, and to have them given me so many gifts, and to be able to give back, is one of the greatest abiding privileges of my life. And I think that, I hope that half of you know half how lucky you are, and half how lucky we all are, right? Just to be here and to be in these rooms. These opportunities, these discussions just don't happen everywhere else. This community is worth everything. Kowalski.
All right. Sorry to bring it down from,
His brother, by the way, was my first boss, first internship at One Sky. In the policy trenches at Waxman Marketing.
But
that was what my question was about. Thank you.
It's okay. But so you've got your company is looking at. Sorry, I'm bringing it down to details again.
No, it's fine.
I love hearing you talk about how much you love Middlebury.
Yeah.
Your company is looking at small, medium scale efficiency projects, right?
Yeah.
And you estimate that these represent 47% of the market.
Yeah.
But you face the interesting challenge that, as opposed to that other 53%,
Right.
each individual customer represents a tiny fraction
Exactly.
of that 47%,
Exactly.
whereas the other 53% are huge deals.
Yep.
And so if you're trying to achieve some kind of scalability, how do you? I'm sorry if this is a scary question
No.
early on in
Not at all.
your business's life, but how do you plan to reach out to that many people
No,
and
I mean,
many projects?
there are no scary questions. Everything about starting a business is scary. Right? Being an entrepreneur is exhilarating and wonderful and terrifying above all. And that is absolutely one of the greatest challenges, and one of the challenges that we've spent pretty much, I'd say 40% of our time for last year thinking about how to solve. Right? We think we put some pretty specific things in place to solve it. Specifically, deal flow is a big problem. How do you find these deals? That's why we built a national network of contractors, right? 5 to 6 of them, enough to bring us projects by offering our financing to their customers they're otherwise losing, right? We're solving a problem for them. They're bringing projects to us that fit our criteria. But then you have a problem. Once you have a project, someone says, yeah, give a loan to that guy. And you're saying, yeah, I'm going to sell it to investors. You got to know that that person isn't going to default, isn't going to walk away. There's risk, and you have to assess that risk. And one of the biggest barriers in finance is how to structure due diligence to make sure that the risk that you're taking is appropriate for your investors and appropriate for your company. The cost of due diligence is one of the big reasons that big banks got big and ESCOs want big deals. So what we did was 2 things. One, we structured our financing not as a performance contract, not guaranteeing the savings, but as a capital lease with fixed repayments, where we would say, based on upfront savings, let's say that LED lighting upgrade I was talking about earlier, $100,000 saves $40,000, right, per year. Your electricity bills go down by $40,000. That's opening up revenue with which you can pay us back. But we're not going to ask for all $40,000. We're going to give you a shared savings buffer, 10, maybe 20%. So instead of paying $40,000 a year, you'll pay $30,000. That means that theoretically, from day one, you'll be cash flow positive. You'll be saving more than you're paying Spark with no upfront cost. So that's good. But more importantly, you'll also have a fixed series of repayments, the same amount of money every month for 35 months, 45 months, 54 months, whatever the lease term is, until you've paid back the project plus interest. So that does 2 things. One, it makes it predictable, makes it stable. It allows you to set up an automatic ACH payment from the business accounts, which drafts the money rather than having them remember to write a check, or even worse, remember to write a variable bill. It saves us on billing, having to send them stuff. It also allows us to assess only their credit risk. We don't have to know whether over 5 years that boiler is going to break, or the insulation isn't going to do exactly what it says it's going to do, because it often doesn't. We don't spend money thinking about that. We vet our contractors to make sure they're going to do a good job and good equipment, but it's fixed upfront payments. It's a capital lease. And so all we have to do is assess the small business credit risk, which is a much more standardized process than assessing project risk in each case. Particularly because we work primarily in buildings, if you think about it, that want efficiency, which are older. The businesses are typically more established, and especially in the community organization market, small business, churches, charter schools, these guys often have established credit histories. So we look at their debt-to-asset ratio, their cash flow, their inbound, outbound receipts and receivables. We have a custom underwriting process that we worked with a company called Dun & Bradstreet to build on their enterprise credit risk assessment platform called DNBI, right? Which they basically allow us to access a database of 225 million small businesses and organizations, all of those financial details, right? Reported through the IRS, all these different available data sources. We assess that data, make a pretty simple loan, no loan decision, right? It's a 48-hour process, one-page application, and we can say, yes, we're going to loan or not. So that makes us look more like Lending Club or Prosper, who are making peer-to-peer loans that are basically just based on credit risk, rather than Mosaic or other energy efficiency companies that are making loans. We are in some ways incidentally an energy efficiency company. We're a capital lease and loaning platform that happens to see energy efficiency as an underserved market we can sell into. Thank you. One more. Ben.
So a lot of the kids have gone on to ICF and they've had short and long careers there.
Yeah.
But your career there was really different. From the day you got there, you were doing that work differently. I mean, you were taking advantage of what they had to offer, but you were also treating it differently. You had a lot of flexibility, you were doing a lot of different things.
Sure.
And within that massive organization. So I think it's important for students to know more about that. You go into a really traditional workplace,
Sure.
and you started to influence it right away.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
I don't want to say that it's not unique in a humble way, because it was.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't want to kind of pretend that, oh yeah, really well. I mean, we definitely did some stuff that made that easier, mostly just by being really audacious, by after hours writing a pretty detailed business case white paper for what they could do, and walking into an office, not saying, hey, could we write a white paper? Or give us hours to write a white paper, we just did it. One of the lessons, I think, that's true at Middlebury, and some of you probably already know this, but it's true especially in companies or with startups, this stuff isn't going to fit into kind of the normal things, right? It's not going to be a class project, it's not going to fit into a 40-hour work week. It takes a lot of extra doing, which is why you should love it and love the people you're doing it with, because it'll burn your weekends to the ground. It'll burn your evenings to the ground. But so for ICF, we kind of marched in with that paper. And I think that's the technical answer to what we did. The other answer really is broader, which is that ICF actually, because it is a mission-based for-profit organization, really does care about how they serve these markets. So if you come in with a good idea that is well thought out and doesn't make no sense at all, right, as long as it really can help the company, they're going to be more receptive institutionally, personally, culturally, than a lot of other businesses. A lot of other businesses will just say no.
So, I mean, let's take Vermont. And so, Vermont myself has been pitching for the last couple of years to nonprofits and to for-profits in Vermont, hire Middlebury graduates.
Yeah.
They're inexpensive, they're brilliant, they'll bring all kinds of information and ideas to what they're doing. But there's either disbelief or a disconnect with groups that haven't done that, or they don't know how, like ICF, to take advantage of that. Who's pulling in young, brilliant people every year.
Mm-hmm.
They're mining that,
Yeah, lots of
to be honest. And so, how would other organizations, how would other for-profits and groups in Vermont, how can we convince them of this benefit? How can we see it? How can we help them see that benefit?
I don't think that your pitch is wrong. I wish you'd tell them they're more expensive. I would just get their expectations set. No, I think that, I guess I wish I had a better answer other than I think that you do a pretty great job at that. I think your pitch is right and your heart's in the right place. I think that you've got the right distribution channels for it. You've got the right levers to get that message out there. I think that honestly, it's more talking to the students. I don't think companies, it's not their job to go out and find us. It's Middlebury students' job to know that we have skills these people want. I think it's this. It's knowing that these are tools you can use. It's knowing that you can apply to a job and stand up straight and say, I can do this for you, right? We have a chip on our shoulder. We're self-conscious for all of our strengths. Middlebury students are weirdly self-conscious about going out into the world and making it happen, with the exception of people who are excited about management consulting and finance, right? But they're better at that. The reason they get jobs, the reason they go to the library in those suits, is because they know they have skills that an industry wants. And they're right. What the change community, as I keep using, right? What this landscape of change, what we lack is an understanding that we have skills that people will pay us for. And we have secondary and tertiary skills that people will promote us for, that people will empower us for. So if you can walk into a company and say, I know how to do that for you, right? For me, with ICF, it was simply saying two things. One, I did a project with a big statistical data set with John on this thing. I know how to use Excel. I'm not great at it. I don't know everything about it. I'll learn, but I banged my head enough against it to know what I don't know. That's why they hired me. Simple as that. Right? I said I'd done a couple of different projects, enough to get started. I can do this for you. That's it. So I really think it has more to do with talking to us. And on the ICF point, I'm not actually that unique. A lot of the Middlebury students that have worked there have killed it. Asher, Burnsburg, we brought in several $100,000 a year. He brought in like $5.5 million. He brought them the Greening the Capital contract, which became a multi-million-dollar recurring revenue stream and totally changed the company. ICF, their biggest problem is that they're passion-driven, mission-focused, kind of very egalitarian. Their biggest problem is they don't know how to reward people like Asher. If you bring a company $6 million in business, and that company is Goldman Sachs, they're going to give you money for it. They're going to promote you. They're going to give you power and access to do it again because they want to grow. ICF, although it's egalitarian and incredibly focused on their mission, which is great and makes it a lovely place to work, doesn't know how to transfer value that way because it's not part of their culture. Just like in some ways it's not part of ours to think about big corporate consultancies. That's their greatest weakness, but at the same time, it does make it a wonderful day-to-day place to work.
So to be respectful of everyone's time, I think we'll have to call it here. But again, thank you all for coming, and let's have one more round of applause for Pier. Also, a lot of new faces here, so if you didn't get a chance to sign in, please do, so we can add you to our newsletter. And Pier also has offered his time to continue the conversation back at the Senate this morning.
Yeah, and again, if you guys want to chat, write it down, got business cards, all that. Again, I love talking to people. That's what it's all about.
I'm Jake.
Jake.